Next week, many of us will be celebrating Thanksgiving. It's a holiday associated with family, the blessings of a fall harvest, and often abundance. For some, it will mean hosting a gathering and all the tasks involved in planning and preparing the holiday meal, making a shopping list, seeking out a fresh turkey, and preparing the holiday meal. Maybe some yams, potatoes, a couple pies, you name it. But for some people in Whatcom County, pulling together a Thanksgiving dinner is a little more challenging because there's no market in close proximity to their home, or they lack transportation to get to a grocery store. You may be aware that Albertsons on Birchwood Avenue closed last year, leaving the Birchwood neighborhood without a local market. Longtime Sumas standby Bromley's Market closed in May after 57 years, impacted by the weak Canadian dollar. Dodson's IGA in Nugent's Corner closed in April, leaving the entire East County up the Mount Baker Highway without a traditional grocery store. If you've lived in Bellingham or Whatcom County for some time, you've seen cost cutters and food pavilions come and go, Albertsons buying Hagen, the jammed Trader Joe's parking lot, Fred Meyer adding the click list service, Whole Foods being bought out by Amazon. What's next? Grocery delivery via drone? So what makes the grocery industry so volatile? How do grocers make their money? How do they choose where to locate? What helps them be successful? We're pleased to welcome Kevin Weatherill, President and CEO of the Markets LLC. Kevin was the past president of the Washington Food Industry Association, the former CEO of Bornstein Seafoods, and the former vice president of operations at Brown & Cole. So Kevin, if you want to come on up to the stage, and while he does that, I'll introduce our second speaker. We'll hear from Mike Cohen, Executive Director of Bellingham's Food Bank. Mike has been the Executive Director of the Bellingham Food Bank for 13 years. He's going to help us understand what constitutes a food desert and where these deserts are located in our communities. And finally, I'd like to introduce Holly O'Neill. Holly serves as the facilitator for the Whatcom Anti-Hunger Coalition. She's a coordinator of the Whatcom Farm to School support team, among many other positions. She also plays a role in the Whatcom Food Network and the Foothills Community Food Partnership. Holly's going to talk about some of the strategies that these groups are pursuing to improve healthy food access across Whatcom County. So let's get started. Kevin Weatherill.
I think I started in the supermarket business when I was 16 years old, 1977, at the old W&M Thriftway in Blaine, owned by Walton and Montfort, Kelly Montfort. And I worked my way full-time through the supermarket business to get my degree at Western. My primary objective was to get a degree and not be in the supermarket business. Turned out I knew a lot more about it, so I should stay with it for a while. But I've seen a lot, and you've seen a lot of changes. And the types of changes that we're going to see coming up in the future here are going to accelerate even more. But you know, if you've lived in town, looking around, I see a lot of people who have lived in town a long time. You remember, you know, the Clark's Market, Hayden, the Hayden family, a bunch of Hagen family. When I started, 76% of food sales in America was through independent supermarket chain. And today that's about 16%. So quite a few changes over these 40 some odd years. Changes in the customer even more so. You know, the one thing that, you know, you look at our business of a supermarket, we compete against really anybody who's selling food. Share of stomach has changed tremendously over the course of these years. 50% of all the food dollars spent are on food that's prepared away from home and usually consumed outside the house. So, that's business that we used to get that we don't get anymore. The areas of the store, we used to sell 80% of all pet food, almost all paper products. You name it, they're called category killers, basically. We've seen the evolution of retail where slivers of our business have been eroded over time. And you still have that 45,000 square foot store that you're paying a pretty hefty lease on, that has a surprisingly high utility bill, and yet you have the slow erosion going on. So I'm a great evader. I don't get out in front of people very often and talk. I find good reasons to, stay in my office or out in the stores to do things, and you can thank or condemn Chuck for getting me here. For some reason, I just spaced out when he asked me about whether or not I wanted to talk about food desserts in Bellingham, and I thought, sure, I can do that. But no, then I read more closely, food deserts. How many people in this room have owned or operated a supermarket before? Okay, so. Yeah, well, I just don't want to be called out on any of the lies I'm about to say over the next 15 minutes or so. Well, I had to look up and see, I've heard what food deserts are over the years. It usually is associated with inner city areas where retailers have left those markets because of, issues of being in those markets. But they do exist in some form. It's kind of an arbitrary, in my opinion, designation, who chooses a mile from a food store and, what a food store offers. You got to have something, I guess. I took about 30 minutes and slammed together these slides so you can proofread them with me as I go through this. It isn't a very busy time of year, this time of year for us. It's turkey roulette. We got to decide how much money we want to lose selling you folks turkeys for Thanksgiving. And it's the 5 years I was out of this business, I enjoyed holidays, and now I'm back into sweating how much money is going to be left after next week. Anyways, we actually looked at buying Bromley's when it was in trouble, but it just doesn't pencil. It's such a difficult business capital-wise. You have to do enough volume to generate the contribution dollars to cover your overhead. And that's really the problem that's going on in our business. Same-store sales have been, for almost every supermarket retailer, has been a pretty big headwind for us. Same-store sales are, what banks like to see as a health of the business. If you've got growing same-store year-over-year sales, you're a healthy business. Well, most supermarkets in the country has been struggling to achieve same-store sales growth. And a lot of it's because of this erosion we're seeing with share of stomach, category killers of, there's not any new ones on the horizon, but now we have mobile apps and web-based shopping that's getting in the way of growth. I'm not sure if I'm going to successfully navigate this, but anyways, I looked up, well, good for me. On that map, if you could read it, I'll go from memory, that's sort of Whatcom County. You can see Sumas has a population of about 1,300. Deming in the proper area has a population of about 353. Birchwood, you can define it a number of ways, but it's about 5,600. Lummi, 5,200, and Sudden Valley, 6,400. So you can see there's markets that are not served by what would be a traditional supermarket, but Lummi, Sumas, Deming, and Sudden Valley have far more than a mile to go to find the next supermarket available. Yeah, great. Another great site. Anyways, you can see from those circles, the different shades they overlay. That's a mile radius. So at the top, that little blurb says Fred Meyer, the middle is Albertsons, and the bottom is Hagen. And if you look right in this area, there's just a little bit of an overlap where the 1 mile radius from Hagen or Fred Meyer does not cover. So it is a convenience issue for that neighborhood, but it's more of a arid savanna than a real food desert. The folks out on the Lummi Peninsula have to go a lot farther, and there's certainly income issues that are similar to find a traditional food store. So I'll talk a little bit about what's going on with the business. We have way too much square footage of any kind of form of retail space in America. We have 7.3 square feet of retail space per person in this country. If you look at Japan, it's 1.7. France, the UK, 1.3. We are terrifically overstored, and that's, we're a big country, a lot of space, cheap land, and hyper development, and we'll be paying for it years forward. If you own commercial property, you're probably aware it's there's going to be tough sledding ahead. We're way overstored, and now you take into account, this little beauty is only 10 years old, and the amount of change we're seeing that's coming from it is enormous. Domino's Pizza just flipped their business with their mobile app. I mean, they put out a pretty slick mobile app that you can see your pizza, where it is in the stage of development, and how long it's going to be to get to your house. So you don't have to sit and wonder anymore if that guy's, coming around the corner. You'll know. And it's growing. So the amount of space that'll shake out, and you've heard about all the store closures over the last 5-6 years, thousands of store closures of any form of retail. Interesting, Amazon wiped out a bunch of bookstores, but now they're opening up actual bookstores. Maybe they'll get into they did get in the food business. They bought Whole Foods, so what do you know? Anyways, we have a pretty big shakeout coming, and I've been experiencing it. 10 years ago, my little company had 18 stores, and we have 9 now. And we've successively navigated, lease restructuring and all kinds of reorganization. But it's a pretty difficult business environment for almost any independent retailer, but in particular, the one I know, food stores. Which is to say, you're probably not going to see a lot more building going on food stores. You're going to see some more displacement. Our stores are too big. Average size is about 45,000 square feet. Most of that's in the interior part of the store, and that section of the store is dying. Consumers are not eating packaged food. They're just not. That's, you cheat on Cheerios and Oreos every once in a while, but, that business is in trouble. And if you look at the growth or the lack of growth of major food manufacturers in America, the big brands, they're shrinking. They're out buying all these little natural, organic companies because that's going to be the only form of growth. And there's consolidation there. You have Heinz and Kraft and Kellogg. They're buying each other up, just like Kroger and Safeway and Albertsons is buying up independents. And Bellingham has, not only are we overstored in general in America, but Bellingham is overstored because of our proximity to the Canadian border. If you look at our population, we're a net importer of Canadian dollars for food and other products, meaning that our residents don't go spend as much money up there as those folks come down here to spend, which affords you, as consumers, a lot more choices than what you'd have if you were in the Kelso, Longview, area where you're not impacted by that. So Whatcom County is doubly exposed in terms of a retail transition away from going to stores to shop. So what does it cost? If you're interested in opening up a supermarket, what does it cost? Our typical lease is somewhere between $35,000 and $50,000 a month. Our electricity bill, we've had leases in the $85,000 per month range. They weren't fun leases. And I said had, we don't have them anymore. Electricity bill can be between 18 and 25. Advertising, we're in that mode where advertising, only 13% of shoppers look at a circular, but it makes a difference if you don't put one out. So we're still stuck paying $3,000 to $5,000 a week per location for printing and distribution of an ad. Weekly known loss, all that food display that we have, big stores, you got to fill them up. We shrink $4,000 to $8,000 a week of fresh food. Typically, it goes to the food bank when we can, but sometimes, this is food we can't repurpose, we can't use in the deli, whatever. Americans won't buy something that has a mark on it, whereas in other parts of the world, that's great food, right? You just cut it off. And you're used to large displays of food. Whereas if you travel to other parts of the world, you see, food is kind of handed to you. You don't even get to touch it a lot of the time. So we're kind of spoiled. And then unknown loss, that's the stuff that we bring in the store, but it doesn't go out the back door to a food bank or as waste, and it doesn't go through the register. That's the stuff that travels home with people and ends up on eBay. If you want to see something interesting, why the heck do we lock up razors? Because we buy more than we sell. And if you go on eBay and look in your neighborhood, you'll be able to buy razors really cheap off eBay. And that's helped funding some of the acquisition of opioids out there. So it's really, a dynamic and difficult business. Average wage, we're a unionized company, and I don't begrudge that. I'm happy that we are. We're able to provide a pretty decent living to our full-time folks. Average wage is about $20 an hour. Healthcare has eaten a lot of wage available over the last 15 years. $4.65 per hour worked, and pension of $1.30. So that's average. So we have some folks, our cost for those per hour could be in the $35 range, and others in the $15, $16 range, but not low, not low. So when you look at, the cost structure and you take into account the erosion of business over time, and look at the canary in the coal mine, major food manufacturers, they're struggling. You've got a big transformation coming in the American food distribution, consumption, acquisition. There'll be fewer players, smaller stores, and you'll have a virtual pantry, basically, from this application. So no one's going to starve. You're just going to get it different. You're going to have a different way of acquisition. What would be interesting, though, like our roads are paid for through gas tax, and how we have growth in electrical vehicles that aren't paying that gas tax, I'm wondering about how displacement of local sales tax will be handled with more and more activity coming from other areas that may not be contributing to funding what your local retailer does now and consumer by buying local. That was my half hour of effort of throwing together, my good news. It is a fun business. It's a big challenge right now for most of us. And it's not a surprise to me that Bob Bromley had trouble. I have a lot of friends in the business that have had trouble. Our company's had trouble. We're healthy now. Our same-store sales are growing. We need to desperately reinvest in many of our locations, and that's our plan. But we love bad weather because we're in some of these small communities, and it keeps people from coming into town and going to Costco and other places. And we had a really good bad winter last year. So we're up against that this year, darn it, and we're hoping for more. So that's it.
Thank you, Kevin. Up next, we have Mike Cohen from the Bellingham Food Bank to show how some of these impacts on the grocery industry affect real people.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Cohen. I'm director of Bellingham Food Bank. It's a thrill to be here. I'm only going to repeat about half of what Kevin talked about. So if you didn't catch it all, you have a second opportunity, and then Holly won't have anything to repeat. That's what you get for going third. So just a real quick thing about Bellingham Food Bank. We're distributing food 5 days a week, 3 days a week from our downtown location, once a week from Christ the King Church on Guide Meridian, and once a week from Alderwood Elementary School. We believe in one thing, and that is that hunger is unacceptable. And we do a lot of work to try to make sure folks in Bellingham and around Whatcom County who are food insecure can get access to not just free food, but good free food, regardless of where they live in Whatcom County. So we partner with about a dozen food banks scattered throughout Whatcom and a few in San Juan County, and are happy to do that. And the issue of food deserts, and I hope what I leave you with, the conditions that create food deserts are really tough for low and low moderate income families throughout Bellingham and all of Whatcom County. This one?
You totally have more time on your hands.
We just give turkeys away. We don't have to buy them. We just ask these people to buy them for us. So Kevin is right. The definitions of food deserts are actually harder and maybe more controversial than folks would think. And Kevin actually had up what the first one that I found when I was re-examining this issue, and that says that parts of the country that are vapid of fresh fruits, vegetables, or other healthful whole foods. By that definition alone, Edgemore might be considered a food desert. Chuckanut Heights might be considered a food desert. When you start to look a little bit deeper into other people's definitions of what constitutes a food desert, it changes. The CDC describes food deserts as areas that lack access to affordable fruits, vegetables, whole grains, low-fat milk, and other foods that make up a full and healthy diet. We don't know how the low-fat milk lobby got to be part of that description, but they're in there and they're powerful. But this definition does begin to focus on access and affordability. Access being proximity to, and then the ability to purchase the affordability piece. And that's getting closer to where I and other folks in the hunger relief world think of food deserts. I think the USDA might be kind of the final voice on this topic, and not surprising, they don't actually have a definition for food deserts. But what they do have are definitions of some of the ingredients that make up or characteristics food deserts. And I think then we can figure out what food deserts mean. So the first thing they focus on is food access, and in terms of location. And for them, that means within a half mile or a mile in urban areas that there's a full service grocery store available, or 10 miles or more if you're in a rural area. So you need to be kind of far away from your grocery store, combined with areas that have higher than usual densities of low-income individuals or families living there. So census tracts where the poverty rate is at 20% or greater. So food deserts are the nexus of higher concentrations of low-income families and some sort of distance from a local full-service grocery store where healthy food is accessible. Why and when did we start caring about food deserts? I always like to go back to try to figure out what the root is of this issue that people pay attention to, and what caused it to rise to the surface of a lot of other critical issues that are out there. And I think it really began looking at community health and the fact that areas with high concentrations of low-income individuals and families who also were some distance from grocery stores were having disproportionately worse health outcomes. That you get groups of low-income folks who are far away from grocery stores, and when they looked at all different measures of health, they were not doing as well as others. That is when food deserts really started to make some hay, and people started to pay attention to them, about when the term first got coined. And it launched things like healthy corner store initiatives, where they were trying to get more fruits and vegetables into the corner stores and bodegas in big cities. And a tremendous amount of energy and probably money was put into trying to change those corner stores a little bit and get people who didn't have access to a full-service grocery store at least the option to buy a banana or apple or some lettuce at their small convenience store. Initially, as Kevin mentioned, it started as an urban issue, and then I think we probably have an urban bias in this country. When people started to look at food deserts, they're like, oh, wow, the people in rural areas, they might have cars, but they're really traveling a long way for everything, not just food. As people started paying attention to this more, I think issues of equity and privilege and racism also started to get discussed, because these low-income communities are one of the things that you need to have to constitute a food desert. And these are oftentimes communities of color. So I think it expanded from just looking at health to some of the other issues that might be out there and challenging these families. I think we're talking about it here today because we all, well, if we came from that side of town, drove by what used to be Albertsons. And Birchwood is a low-income community, and the communities that surround Birchwood are low-income. For Bellingham, they are our communities of color, and they're growing in that. And that store closed in 2017. We also heard Kevin talk about Dotson's IGA closing in 2017 and Bromley's and Sumas closing in 2017. So this is a real thing in Bellingham and in Whatcom County. I think folks who live in this community, who live in the Birchwood area, they had something taken away from them. Even if they didn't shop there much, it sucks to have something taken out of your community. And then it's awful to see this big empty hole in your community. So even if it's not a grocery store, to see that, and there's bad outcomes of empty spaces in communities. So I get why it's real and painful for folks who live in Birchwood. But I also want to point out that Birchwood is now just the newest food desert in Whatcom County, and we've had several for some time. So first, these are going to be some repeat slides of Kevin's, hopefully just as difficult to see and make out. So first, let's look at those characteristics. So we need low-income communities, and we need communities that lack grocery stores. So here's low-income Bellingham, the blue shaded part. So what that is, since it's hard to get these maps to show up well, isn't it? We're looking at Birchwood, Alderwood, Cordata, Marietta. Lummi Reservation is that huge blue swath out there. But also Roosevelt, Geneva, Alabama, and even parts of Fairhaven and Seaholm and Happy Valley, mostly due to the dense student population over there. But those folks need to eat and shop too. And I think that we too often think that, oh, they're college kids, they'll be fine. Like, not necessarily true. And we see that at the food bank all the time. But to make up a food desert, we then need to add that component of what areas are missing grocery stores. And we'll see here that it changes a little bit. So the yellowish one, which is Lummi, that means that they need vehicle access to get to a grocery store. Green areas mean that they're a mile away from a full-service grocery store, and the gold means that they are about a half mile away from a grocery store. So Bellingham's got some food deserts in it, and in the neighborhoods that you probably might expect. Whatcom County is not immune from being in a food desert. We'll take a look at that in just a second. So first we'll look at low-income Whatcom County. And despite what some people say, Bellingham is a part of Whatcom County. So you see Bellingham is still represented there. Lummi Reservation, Birch Bay. And then that's not another ocean over there. That's what we refer to as East County. So you've got Acme, Kendall, Deming, Maple Falls, Glacier. Just a huge part of our community is relatively low income and lives in some concentrated areas in Burlington and big parts of Whatcom County. When we throw in how far are they away from the grocery store, that will give us the equation that equals up to a food desert. And it's all the same Bellingham ones, and then all of East County, because there's no grocery store out there. There's just zero access for them to purchase food without coming into town or shopping at convenience stores. So I don't think congratulations are in order for Birchwood to join the group of food deserts. It's not an easy place to be, but it is just the latest place. And I think we should pay attention to all the other areas where food deserts exist because of what it creates for families, which is a little more hardship to go and get food. But the next question I want to raise is, are food deserts real? I mean, they're real by definition, but is that what creates sort of poor health outcomes for folks who live in them? There's no debate, though, that there are low-income areas without access to grocery store. By one study, almost 20% of our country lives in a food desert. I didn't do the math to figure out population-wise if that's what it's like for Bellingham or Whatcom County, but it probably is. It certainly looks that way by the map. But what is debatable is if food deserts is what's having an impact on people's full and healthy diet. Is that lack of proximity to a grocery store the thing? And it turns out that when you talk to low-income families like we do at the food bank, or look at studies that have looked at the contributing factors to health outcome, that is a little more debatable. In 2014, there was a study done that looked at how sensitive food stamp participants were to specific types of food and stores and food access. And what this survey showed, irregardless of rural or urban setting, was that many households who are low income bypassed the store that was closest to them. They went to the store that had the lowest prices. Maybe not for everything, but for that full grocery cart purchase, they would do the extra work to get to the least expensive store for what they were shopping for. For me, this is confirmed by getting to spend a fair bit of time each year with students from all of our different community schools who do food drives for the food bank. And one of the things I always ask us is, where do you get your food from? And we talk about all the different grocery stores we rescue food from, the stuff that they donate to us. And I usually ask them, where do you shop? And school by school, where they shopped was very, very different. And a lot of the kids who went to Birchwood or Cordata or Alderwood elementary schools shopped at Winco, Walmart, or Fred Meyer. And this was when Albertsons was in existence. Not too far from where Albertsons was Hagen's store. But their families, for a variety of reasons, didn't shop at the store that was most proximate to them. So proximity to affordable and healthy foods, I don't think guarantees that people's diets are going to get better and change and that they're going to get healthier. There's just too many studies that show otherwise. The truth is, we usually eat the food that we grew up with and the food that we think tastes good and the food that's kind of part of your individual's family's history and experience. And if that is prepackaged food, stuff that might not be healthy for you, quick and easy to eat and serve to your family, that is oftentimes what that family is going to eat. It's not going to be the food that their doctor tells them to. You put on top of it a severely limited income and purchasing power, and things will change even more dramatically. The low-income mom or dad cannot spend money on broccoli in hopes that their child's going to eat broccoli if they have to throw it away, because when my daughter doesn't eat it, we can replace it with another food. She's not gonna go hungry. But that single mom or dual parent household that is really low income can't really purchase the food that they know they should purchase, and if their kids don't eat it, they don't have a backup that they can go to. They can't take the risks of healthy food if that's not part of their experience, oftentimes. So, to me, the food deserts are most created by income. I think income is the thing that really is what creates the food desert. One scholar wrote that putting a really good grocery store in a food desert isn't going to guarantee its success, and I think that that's very true. There's no doubt that having a grocery store near you will make life easier, but it won't guarantee that positive change that we're hoping will happen. And I just want to end up with a quote from a Wall Street Journal article that was about food deserts from 3 scholars. And it said that the fundamental causes of health disparities, including but not limited to obesity, are chronic socioeconomic disadvantage and in turn chronic stress. For the poor, the problem has less to do with food deserts and more to do with income deserts, education deserts, and quality healthcare deserts. And I think as we examine food deserts, we need to look at all of these bigger pictures, because to me, they're just a symptom of what is a rigged system. They're a symptom of a rigged system against low-income folks, and that's what we need to work on trying to change. If we're looking at food deserts, we need to look at the other stuff as well. Thanks.
No, my name's Holly O'Neill, and I live in that big ocean called East Whatcom County. We swim here every day. So I wanted to start by going back to the question that framed your day, which is a really good question. So here's what it said on your program. Do you remember this? Given Whatcom County's abundant food resources, how is it possible that there are places in Whatcom County without easy access to healthy, fresh, affordable food? And that is a great question. And as my colleagues have pointed out, it's not only a big question and a big problem, but it's a growing problem, and it's a system problem. So I'm going to talk about it at the level of the system. Why is it a system problem? Why is it a bigger problem than you may even realize, even after the chilling news presented here by our colleagues, and leaving on a happy note what you can do about it? So let's start with a really basic primer in what is a food system. So you've seen this before, right? You get an idea, right? So there's production, there's aggregation and distribution, there's processing, marketing, the access to actually the grocery stores, your outputs, the consumption, the preparation of food, and then the waste. So that's a really simple model of the food system, right? And throughout that whole system, here's a slightly more complex one, is this weaving together of the people and the policies and the culture that our food system, that binds it all together. And it is this culture of the food system in total that defines what we get to eat right now in this room and who gets to eat what in our community. It's this system that defines that for us. And our system, I don't know if you can see this system, if you look at what's happening over time, this system is creating certain results, right? Like we can see, I mean, what I think is so amazing is that within my lifetime, I can actually see these changes. The way that when you were speaking about things speeding up, like you can see the changes happening. I mean, it's built on 100 years of choices that we've made as a society, but it's changing really fast. So food insecurity, 20 years ago, we had 1 out of 11 people in our community facing food insecurity, which means that I don't know, I'm not sure where my next meal is coming from, at least one time during this week, right? That's a serious issue. Where are we at right now, Mike? Yeah, we're in 1 in 5. In 20 years, in the time that I've been in the working world, we've moved from 1 out of 11 to 1 in 5. Right? Do you grasp? I hope you can all be as alarmed as I am by that figure. We're also seeing this rise in the rates, of course, of diabetes and obesity and these health-related or these diet-related health problems, and of course the increase of food deserts, which is what we're talking about. We're seeing a whole bunch of other things, such as the decline in farmlands, the decline in our fisheries, the decline in our water quality. And what I want to propose to you is that these are not unrelated. They're, in fact, completely connected. So one document that I'd really like to offer for your attention is this Whatcom Community Food Assessment. It was first done in 2011, and it was released, believe it, the 2017 update was just released last week, and it's available online. So you guys can all go out of here and go look this up and get a lot more information about what's going on in all the different aspects of our food system. Not only what the trends are, but also what are the collaborations and things that people are doing on the ground to try and fix it. So our food system, we have a problem. And one thing to bear in mind is that it is all connected. And I started really understanding this connection when I started a number of years ago working to create this Whatcom Farm to School program. Because it seemed like it was gonna be so easy. You know, like how hard could this be, right? You have some really delicious food grown right here in Whatcom County. You have some adorable children, right? Like how can it not be easier to put those two together? And yet, if in trying to actually get local healthy food into the school meal program, yes, I bet you can imagine, and get that to work and get kids to eat that, it is an enormous challenge at so many levels. From the fact that over the last couple of decades, there's not even equipment to cook the food in our school kitchens anymore. It's all heating up. When I first started, I don't think they're doing it now, but don't mean to scare you, but Lunchables, they were like packaged sandwiches in plastic, and they'd put them in the microwave, and that's what they'd serve. So, we're making improvement. I don't want to scare you, but, we have a long way to go in terms of helping fix those systems. The staff don't have training. The systems themselves try to get a carrot from point A to point B and processing it. That is not a simple problem, right? So, and as Mike said, and this is a really important point, which is these kids, here's a little one, but these kids also have to eat it. So if I've spent a lot of time in the schools making, I've really put some effort in, and then it goes into the garbage, how motivated am I as a food service staff? Right? To keep on making that effort. Okay, so this kid, I think is the cutest kid ever. This is, she was up at the Foothills Food Bank a couple of weeks ago, getting ready to chew on that squash, I think. And this child is getting access to this squash, this locally grown squash, because a farmer donated it to the food bank. However, right down the street, where she can get her groceries, or her family can get groceries, is the Valero, right at Kendall. You know this store? Yep, that's a convenience store, and here's what's inside. Right? So I want to connect the dots here about this cycle, this system loop that happens between the food that you eat, your health, this is what Mike was talking about, how that works out for you in terms of your performance at school and your performance ultimately at work, and then what kind of income you make, right? So if I am only eating really unhealthy food for most of my life, and then I see those declining health benefits, or maybe I'm in school and I can't pay attention because all I've had, right, is sugar now for days, that affects my performance, which ultimately affects what kind of job I get, which ultimately affects my income, which ultimately affects how much money I have to pay for food, right? So that cycle goes around and around and around, and it goes around and it goes around for generations of people who start to get used to this cheap food. And hence, what's happening, and what I would propose to you, and the longer that I have been working on this issue, is that I think actually our food system right now in Whatcom County is a poverty-generating machine. I think that's actually what we've got. A poverty-generating machine, where we're driving ourselves to cheaper and cheaper food, eating more and more of that food, right? Having over time the health costs, which reduces our income, right? And there we go. So these boys, these are cute East Whatcom County boys, we could feed them, here's the other big issue, we could feed them that ideal school meal, which does exist on rare occasions. But the question is will they eat it? My daughter is there, she's smiling. She knows this problem. Will they eat it? And part of the problem is because their taste buds have been accommodating cheap food, chicken nuggets and pizza, and that's the cool food, and that's what's marketed to them, right? So even if they actually have access to some of the healthier food, will they eat it? So that's one big problem. I want to talk about what happened in the sad state of Nugent's Corner, the IGA, Dodson's, my store, where friends meet friends, or they used to, because now it's closed. Did you ever go to the IGA in Deming? Okay, right? Remember how it used to be? It was a nice store. You went in there was lots of food, lots of people. Sometimes you had spaghetti in the parking lot with your peeps. And then what you saw happening over time is you saw more and more people deciding that the cheaper food was the better food and getting in their cars and going to Winco. And to Walmart and to these other big box stores. So what happens to this over time, right? So what happens today? It's another system loop. Fewer people are shopping. That means there's less revenue. That means there's less money to pay for food and staff. That means next time, I mean, seriously, watching the decline of this store was a chilling experience. To walk in and say, oh my gosh, there's like empty shelves. They're literally, did you see that? It would be like empty shelves. And so the more there's empty shelves, the more you don't go back there, right? Because first of all, it's really depressing. And secondly, because you can't get what you want and your time is limited and you got some kids, right? So you don't go back. So over time, all they needed is one killer problem. They had some things happen to them that were unfortunate, and they were done. So we don't have this store anymore. Now, Christine had asked me to speak to transportation. So how about if we don't get any stores out in the East County, but we just get more buses? And we get more people to bus in or to use public transportation, because some of us have cars, but a lot of us don't. And so let's say we're going to bus to Bellingham to do our grocery shopping. So I want to ask you, how many people actually bus to do your grocery shopping? Good for you. Give them a hand. Good job. And are you all Bellingham people, perchance? Yeah, Because imagine spending all day doing this. Imagine how much you're going to be able to carry. And imagine if you happen to, say have 4 children with you on the bus. Right? So I really want to impress upon you, there's this illusion that maybe, how about if we put more buses up? And it's a good idea. I'm not saying that having better public transportation isn't a good thing. I'm just saying it won't solve this problem. Right? Okay. So I'm going to just do 2 other quick system loops. Here's one of our local farms. Those are farm worker in the field. Because of the pressure of the global marketplace, that farmer is trying to get their cost down. They're trying to meet that price point, right? Their cost of inputs is going up. They have labor. Their labor's not making enough money. So that's all creating increased pressures, right, for them to bring their cost down, which means we're seeing a decline in farmland, but all those people are also now going to, where are they shopping? Yeah, they're shopping at Winco. They're all going to where they can get the cheap food, which then does what? keeps that pressure, keeps driving the prices down, keeps making us think that we should all have cheap food, right? So the system just keeps rolling. And then we run it again. So, what do we do? First of all, we all eat. So one of the great things about this issue, and why I want to say, of all that, you talk about a huge number of interesting things here. You know, I loved hearing what the topics you're grappling with, but this issue of food is so important right now. And it is such a unifying issue because we all eat. So regardless of what side of the political spectrum we come from, we can all agree on the necessity of food, right? Like, it is a unifying force. And here are some things you can do. First off, pay attention. Just pay attention. Pay attention to the little opportunities you have to make those little choices. Every time you hit that Amazon, this is not to guilt trip you, but every time, because I do it too, right? Oh, I'm just feeling, I just want that good deal. I mean, we all love the good deal, right? So every time you hit that button and you go, oh, we get the good deal, woo, and you get that little thrill, woo, that little good deal. Every time that you get into that addiction, you are contributing to this whole system, right? Every time, and we're all guilty of it. We are all part of this. But you can do little tiny things all the time. You can go, oh, look, it's an eat local first thing. I could buy something local that'll help my local farmer, right? I can, oh, it's harvest of the month. I could send and make sure my kid has school lunch that day. Or, oh, they're trying to bring in salad bars. I could make sure they try that. You can spend a little extra money at your locally owned community food co-op or any of the other great local markets. And you can give to places like the Whatcom Community Foundation, which has been really providing such an incredible amount of support in our community to addressing these food system issues. So these are all, like, every day, you can do little tiny things and get out of that idea that, oh no, I just don't have enough money today, because friends, I'm looking around this room. I think we have, we are the people who actually have the ability to start making some of these little subtle system changes. And then prepare to engage. This is the Foothills Food Access Plan. So us in the county, is anybody else from Eastern Whatcom County here? My child is, good job. Anybody else? All right. So, in East Whatcom County, we are doing food system planning to try and address these issues, right? Grassroots empowerment. And I invite you also, in the next couple years, over the next couple years, we're going to be doing, we are going to be creating a food system plan. Because we need to join the movement that is happening across this country to reclaim and rebuild our local food systems. It is absolutely critical that we do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Holly, and also Mike and Kevin. Wow, fantastic. We have about 10 minutes now for you to ask these folks your questions. We have two people around the room with microphones.
Is it on? Yeah. Steve Greider from Skagit County. I have a question for all three of you to respond to. I've heard the question posed, how do we make the healthy choice the easy choice? And I wonder if you could speak to some examples where you've been successful, like within the food bank or in the school system or even on a retail store display, merchandising, how you help consumers make that healthy choice as opposed to the convenient choice or the cheaper choice.
Make the bad food taste bad. So,
No sugar, salt, or fat.
well, at the food bank, I can say what we've done there is to make sure that, first of all, we have the healthy choice, and that's by partnering with local farmers, getting support from local foundations and individuals. So we make sure that we have a lot of good local healthy produce consistently at our food bank. And once it's out there enough, people then, at least at the food bank, start to take it and use it. And what was once foreign, if kale is out there every single week with beets and cabbage and things that may not have been appealing initially, folks will bring it home because it's out there. I think it's much harder when the healthy choice is also an economic choice, and that's the struggle that a low-income family is having to make as to what to purchase. I've got a limited income, and I'm not exactly sure what my kids are going to eat, and I got to make sure that they will eat it.
I think on healthy food, you can, the adage, you could lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. I mean, it really is a transition issue right now. You have restaurants the restaurants that are successful are using kale and other beneficial, nutrient-dense foods in a tasty and friendly way. Customers experience those, they look for them, and they start picking them up. But you have a lot of yesterday's winners that are paying the bills, and you can't just kick them out of your store, or you'll have no store. So there's a transition, and it really, big food, craft, the guys that are stuffing the sugar, salt, and fat down our throats, they're struggling. They are struggling. So it is changing. It's just going to take time. And you're never going to eliminate it all. I mean, you need a Cheeto once in a while. It's not like,
See a question over
it all
here
out.
behind you, Chuck? Or in front?
If you watch the news, you see that on the federal level, there's been a lot of concern about the border security, immigration. Yet we depend upon a lot of these people to come in here to pick those healthy fruits and vegetables that we all enjoy in the supermarket. I was wondering have you seen an impact on the supply of among producers of food, among farmers who actually are making the food, but can't find enough workers to pick it to bring it to market. Have you found that to be a problem?
Well, I think the whole question about whether there's enough workers here really depends on your point of view. So right now there are enough workers. There are enough farm workers. The question is whether or not we as a community are going to help pay attention to making sure that they're safe and able to stay here. And so at this point, I mean, there's a lot going on in that whole world of immigration reform. But I would say that the goal is to make sure that the farm workers who have been here for as long as most of us have are able to continue to work, and that we continue to support them.
I think I attended the National Produce Convention for the first time, primarily because it was in New Orleans, but there's a lot of changes coming to the way crops are harvested, and it's mostly technology. For years, we have close relations with growers in Eastern Washington. We have a store in Wapato that relies heavily on immigrant workers. We've seen fewer of them over time. Some of that's government policies and being afraid. Some of that is changes in the way that crops are picked. There's going to be a lot more automation, robots, that sort of thing going on for harvesting. So the market's going to sort that out, I think. I mean, you'll pay more for food in some cases, but growers are investing heavily in alternative, non-human harvesting methods.
So Chuck has another question.
My question is this. None of you mentioned home gardening, and I know the United Nations has said that small organic farms locally and family farms and really urban gardening are probably one of the most important things we can do to improve our food system. And I'm wondering if you didn't mention, I mean, I'm coming from the York neighborhood where people are doing farming in their front yards now, not just their backyards. I'm wondering if the reason you didn't mention this is simply because there's no way to measure it, or because you thought it was unimportant.
We strongly discourage it. We love it when you pickle and that sort of stuff, because you can't make that at home. You have to buy the ingredients for it. But I think it's a factor. We have a garden at our house. It produces more than we can consume. But it's really, in my space, it's not something that I'm dwelling on, home gardening or home butchery or any of that kind of stuff.
I think that it is really important, and it was just a matter of, how much time we had to talk. But one of the other advantages, besides just increasing your food self-reliance, is also that when you're raising kids and they are experiencing gardening, then it really connects to Steve's question about what makes it the easy choice. So if a kid has had the experience of growing a carrot, they're going to be more likely to eat a carrot, right? So it is actually a really important thing from that health perspective. And helping to break that cycle. Like a lot of the kids in our community, even though they're low income, they're still looking for and choosing healthy foods because they've had that experience of growing the food themselves.
Great. There's a question over here.
Hi, I'm Sarah Brownsberger. I'm wondering how much of our food desert is actually a food preparation desert. 100 years ago in New York City, kids went hungry because their kids couldn't afford coal and didn't have a stove at home. And the big difference between eating and being poor and not eating and being poor was cooking time. And now that everybody has to work so much to pay for their housing and their insurance, there's no time to make the right choice, the easy choice, by chopping it up and creaming it or whatever it is that's going to make your kid, or making nice sauce for them to sop up on their broccoli. That takes time. That's striking that this dimension, this domestic work that was producing food, everything is prepackaged. How much of that is because people don't have time to cook?
I certainly think that that's part of it. I think home gardens are a great complement. I know for the families that we see at the food bank, it's just income is the biggest barrier. And food prep, home gardening, home pickling, all those things can help. But when your family is making $1,000 to $1,500 a month, $2,000 a month even, you're going to struggle with food no matter how creative you are, no matter how close or far from a grocery store you are. So home gardens are great. That food prep time is critical and a skill that families need to be healthy and eat on a constrained budget, but for us, it's that access to income, which is the biggest challenge that they face, and that's the highest hurdle to get over first.
We have a question here.
Yes, I was wondering what is the quality of food that's served at the cafeterias in the public schools in Whatcom County, and if it is substandard, what efforts are being made to elevate that standard to provide our children with better quality food?
You could probably do a whole forum on that. Do you want to talk about it, Holly, since you're...
Sure. It's making steady improvement. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, there has been a lot of effort over the last two decades to try and improve school meals so that kids are healthier, right? So that they get that food experience, number one, of what good food tastes like, but also because you have to remember, and Mike can chime in on this, what a large percentage of our community, our children, are relying on those meals every day. It's a huge quantity of food, and right? So the movement towards getting healthier food into our school cafeterias is a critical issue for making sure our community is well fed. So it's making progress. All I can say is that, do you know that Bellingham is building a central kitchen, Bellingham School District? You guys passed a bond for that not so long ago. So that's going to be really super helpful.
We have time for one more.
Aren't there federal standards that are required for public schools?
Go ahead, you jump.
Yeah, the question was, are there federal standards that dictate what the food needs to be? And yes, and I'd say that they're pretty poor federal standards when you look at what... All the schools are meeting the federal standards, and many of us have issues with the food that's being produced but meeting those federal standards.
Well, they're better than they were. They're better than they were, but they have a long way to go. And really, it is going to take... we need to do better than the standards. That's the long and short.
It's all lobbied,
This is it,
You've got
right
big
here.
manufacturing, big food. The food pyramid's lobbied. So, everybody wants their spot, and they're funding the election of officials that support it. So, same old story.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time this afternoon, but thank you very much to all three of our speakers today.
Yeah.